That seat isn't for you. Move to the back or get off my aircraft. Captain Marcus Reed's voice cuts through the luxury cabin of the Gulfstream G650ER like a blade through silk. His words hang in the pressurized air, sharp and final, carrying the weight of assumed authority and barely concealed contempt. Dr. Zara Mitchell looks up from her tablet, her dark eyes steady behind wire-rimmed glasses. She's sitting in seat 1A, the bulkhead suite of the private jet, wearing a simple Nike hoodie and dark jeans. Her sneakers are scuffed, her leather backpack worn at the edges. To anyone looking, she appears to be exactly what Captain Reed assumes she is, someone who doesn't belong. "Excuse me?" Zara's voice is calm, measured. She slides her boarding pass across the cream leather armrest. Seat 1A paid in full. Reed doesn't touch the boarding pass. Instead, he looks her up and down with the practiced disdain of someone who's made these calculations 1,000 times before. His silver hair is perfectly styled, his uniform crisp with military precision, his jaw set in the rigid line of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. There's obviously been a computer error, he says, his tone suggesting the conversation is already over. This is a restricted seat. High-value passenger only. We have seating available in the aft cabin that would be more appropriate. From seat 3B, Alejandro Vega, an investment banker in his early 30s, discreetly opens his phone camera. Something about the captain's tone, the way he emphasizes appropriate, sets off alarm bells. Alejandro has spent enough time in corporate boardrooms to recognize the coded language of discrimination. More appropriate for whom Zara asks. She hasn't moved from her seat, hasn't raised her voice. Her question is simple, direct, and it lands in the cabin like a challenge no one expected. Reed's jaw tightens. He's used to passengers who apologize, who gather their belongings quickly when confronted by his authority. This woman's calm resistance throws him off his script. "Look, miss." He pauses, realizing he doesn't know her name and doesn't care to learn it. "This aircraft operates under strict protocols. Certain seats require specific clearance levels. I need to see identification and proof of ticket purchase." "My ticket was scanned at the gate," Zara replies evenly. "I'm seated exactly where I'm supposed to be." In seat 2, a Isabella Rodriguez, a Latina socialite with 15 years of private aviation experience, lowers her magazine. She's watched this dynamic before, seen the subtle dance of exclusion that happens in elite spaces. Her own ascent in luxury circles taught her to recognize the signs. "Is there a problem?" Captain Isabella's voice carries the authority of old money and established connections. "The flight was supposed to depart 10 minutes ago." Reed turns toward Isabella, his demeanor instantly shifting to the deferent professionalism he reserves for passengers who meet his visual criteria for belonging. "No problem at all, Mrs. Rodriguez. Just a minor seating adjustment. We'll have this resolved momentarily." The distinction in his tone, respectful for Isabella, dismissive for Zara, isn't lost on anyone in the cabin. In seat 4, B. Marcus Thompson, a tech journalist covering diversity in corporate America, starts recording discreetly. His instincts, honed by years of documenting discrimination in elite industries, tell him this is about to become a story. "I don't need seating adjustments," Zara says quietly. "I need to understand why you believe I shouldn't be sitting here." It's a perfect question, forcing Reed to articulate assumptions he's more comfortable leaving unspoken. The cabin goes quiet, except for the hum of auxiliary power and the distant sound of ground crews preparing for departure. Reed steps closer to seat 1A, using his height and uniform to create an intimidating presence. "Listen carefully. I'm the captain of this aircraft. When I identify a security concern or operational issue, passengers comply without argument. This seat is reserved for our highest-tier clientele, and there's been an obvious mistake in your booking." "What kind of mistake?" Zara asks. "The kind that happens when people try to use travel benefits they haven't earned." Reed replies, his mask of professionalism finally slipping. Or when system glitches place passengers in cabins they can't actually afford. The silence that follows is electric. Every passenger in the cabin understands exactly what Reed is implying, and exactly why he's implying it. "I'm going to need you to be very specific about what you mean by that," Zara says, her voice dropping an octave. The temperature in the cabin seems to drop with it. Reed realizes he's walked into dangerous territory, but his pride won't let him retreat. 22 years of military and civilian aviation have taught him that backing down from passengers destroys command authority. He doubles down. "I mean that this is a $75,000 seat on a transatlantic charter. I mean that passengers who belong here don't dress like they're heading to a college lecture." He gestures at her hoodie with barely concealed disgust. "I mean that people who can actually afford premium aviation don't argue when crew members identify booking irregularities." Alejandro's camera is rolling now, capturing every word. His investment banking background makes him acutely aware of the legal implications of what he's witnessing. This isn't just bad customer service, it's actionable discrimination. Captain Reed Isabella interrupts, her voice sharp with authority. "I need to stop you right there. What you're describing sounds like passenger profiling based on appearance." Reed spins toward her, irritation flashing across his face. "Mrs. Rodriguez, with respect, this is an operational matter. I have the authority and responsibility to ensure proper passenger placement for safety and security reasons." Safety and security. Marcus Thompson speaks up from 4B. His journalist instincts fully engaged. "Can you explain how her clothing poses a safety threat?" Reed's face reddens. The conversation is spiraling beyond his control, with multiple passengers now questioning his authority. In his experience, passengers either comply immediately or cause enough disruption to justify removal. This middle ground, calm, persistent questioning is unfamiliar territory. "I don't owe explanations to every passenger who wants to debate airline policy," Reed snaps. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one final time to gather your belongings and move to the assigned seating in the rear cabin." "Which seat specifically?" Zara asks. 8D. "Near the lavatory. The specification reveals everything." Seat 8D isn't just alternative seating, it's the least desirable location on the aircraft, typically reserved for late bookings or staff travel. Moving Zara from 1A to 8D isn't a lateral adjustment, it's a deliberate downgrade designed to humiliate. "And who will be sitting in 1A instead?" Zara continues. Reed hesitates. The honest answer that he's planning to upgrade his personal friend David Kumar, who bought a standard charter seat, would expose the real motivation behind the forced move. "That's operational information not available to passengers," he says finally. Actually, Sarah Kim, the flight attendant, speaks up for the first time. Her voice is quiet but clear. "The manifest shows 1A is occupied by Z. Mitchell. The ticket scanned properly at boarding." Reed whips around to face Sarah, his authority challenged from within his own crew. "Miss Kim, return to your duties. This is a command decision based on operational requirements you're not qualified to assess." "I'm qualified to read a passenger manifest?" Sarah replies, surprising herself with her courage. "And I'm qualified to know that passengers have rights." The dynamic in the cabin shifts dramatically. With crew members now contradicting the captain's version of events, Reed's position becomes increasingly untenable. But rather than retreat, he escalates. "Fine," Reed says, his voice rising for the first time. "Let me make this crystal clear for everyone. This is my aircraft. On this aircraft, I am the final authority. If I determine that a passenger poses a security risk, or if I identify potential fraud in ticketing, I have the legal right to refuse transport." "Security risk?" Zara repeats, her eyebrows raising slightly. "You consider me a security risk? I consider anyone who argues with crew instructions to be a potential security risk, yes." It's a catastrophic statement recorded on multiple devices that transforms the situation from passenger service dispute to legal liability. Reed has just accused a passenger of being a security threat for the crime of questioning discriminatory treatment. Captain Alejandro says, still recording, "Are you stating for the record that questioning discriminatory seating practices constitutes a security threat?" Reed realizes he's trapped himself, but his ego won't allow admission of error. "I'm stating that disruptive passengers who refuse to comply with crew instructions pose operational challenges that I'm authorized to address." "How exactly have I been disruptive?" Zara asks. "I haven't raised my voice, haven't left my seat, haven't threatened anyone. I've simply asked questions about why you want me to move." The reasonableness of her response, contrasted with Reed's increasingly aggressive stance, makes the discrimination undeniable. Every passenger in the cabin can see the disparity in treatment, and several are now documenting it for the world to see. Marcus Thompson opens his Instagram live feed. "Folks, I'm broadcasting from a private jet at Teterboro Airport, where we're witnessing what appears to be clear discrimination against a black passenger by the aircraft captain." The viewer count starts at 0 and begins climbing immediately. 12 viewers. 34. 67. Sir Reed says, pointing at Marcus, "Turn off that device immediately. Photography is not permitted on this aircraft." Actually, Isabella interjects, passengers have the right to document their travel experience unless specifically prohibited by written airline policy. "Do you have such a policy?" Reed doesn't answer because Skybound Aviation doesn't have such a policy. His demand is improvised, another overreach of authority designed to control a situation sliding beyond his grasp. "Enough," Reed says, his voice now carrying the sharp edge of someone whose authority has been publicly questioned once too often. "Miss, you have 30 seconds to move to 8D voluntarily, or I will call airport security to escort you from this aircraft." The threat hangs in the air like smoke from an explosion. Calling airport security on a passenger for refusing to give up a properly booked seat crosses every line of professional conduct. It's the nuclear option, and Reed has just armed the warhead. Zara looks around the cabin. Every passenger is watching. Phones are recording. The moment has arrived when she must decide whether to comply with discrimination or force the confrontation to its logical conclusion. "Captain Reed," she says, "slowly, I want to make sure I understand what you're threatening. You're saying that if I don't voluntarily give up the seat I paid for to accommodate someone whose identity you won't reveal, you'll have me arrested. I'm saying I'll have you removed for being a disruptive passenger who refuses to comply with crew instructions. And the crew instruction is to move from first class to economy because of how I'm dressed." Reed pauses. When stated so plainly, the discrimination is undeniable. But he's committed to his course of action now, and military training taught him never to retreat once engaged. The crew instruction is to move to appropriate seating based on operational requirements. What operational requirements specifically? Reed's jaw works silently for several seconds. He has no answer because there are no operational requirements. The only requirement is his personal discomfort with a black woman in first class. "I don't owe you an explanation," he says finally. "This is my final warning." Marcus Thompson's live stream now has 247 viewers, with comments flooding in faster than he can read them. The hashtag private jet discrimination is starting to appear in the chat. Isabella Rodriguez stands up in her seat. "Captain, as someone who has flown private aviation for 15 years, I need to inform you that what you're describing constitutes discrimination based on race and appearance. You're creating legal liability for yourself and this airline. Ma'am, please sit down and allow me to handle this situation. I will not sit down while you abuse a fellow passenger." Alejandro Vega joins her in standing. "This is unconscionable. You're clearly targeting her because of her race. And you're all being manipulated by someone who doesn't belong here." Reed shoots back, his filter completely gone now. "Look around this cabin. Look at the other passengers. Does she fit? Does she look like someone who dropped 75 grand on a transatlantic flight?" The statement is so nakedly prejudiced that it stuns everyone into momentary silence. Reed has just argued on multiple recordings that black passengers don't belong in first class because of their appearance. Sarah Kim, the flight attendant, speaks into the silence. "Captain, I need to formally object to your handling of this situation. Miss Kim, you're out of line. No, sir, you are. This passenger's ticket is valid. Her behavior has been appropriate. You're asking me to participate in discrimination, and I won't do it." Reed's command structure is collapsing around him. With his own crew openly contradicting his orders and passengers documenting his every word, he faces a choice: retreat and lose face, or escalate and face the consequences. He chooses escalation. Reed pulls out his cell phone and dials airport operations. "This is Captain Reed on skybound flight SB-404. I have a disruptive passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. I need security assistance for passenger removal." The call echoes through the cabin's silence. Reed has just officially accused Zara of being disruptive, creating a federal incident report that will follow both of them through the legal proceedings to come. Zara sits perfectly still as Reed makes the call. Her expression hasn't changed throughout the entire confrontation. She appears calm, almost serene, as if watching events unfold from a great distance. "Security is en route," Reed announces after hanging up. "Ma'am, you have until they arrive to make this easy on yourself." Captain Zara says quietly, "You have no idea what you've just done." The Gulfstream G650ER sits on the Titterboro tarmac like a predator poised for flight. Tail number N847ZM gleams under the harsh airport, lighting its pristine white fuselage, reflecting the storm clouds gathering over the Manhattan skyline. At $75 million, it represents the absolute pinnacle of private aviation, a flying palace designed for passengers who never hear the word no. Inside the cabin is a masterpiece of luxury engineering. Cream-colored leather seats that cost more than most people's cars are arranged in a configuration that maximizes both comfort and privacy. Hand-polished walnut trim gleams under soft LED lighting that adjusts automatically to time of day and altitude. The air filtration system refreshes the cabin atmosphere every 90 seconds, maintaining the kind of pure environment that money can't quite buy on commercial flights. But tonight, that rarefied atmosphere carries the weight of something far less refined, the toxic tension of prejudice colliding with power. 8 passengers occupy the cabin, their demographics a study in contrasts. In the forward section, Isabella Rodriguez represents old Hispanic money, third-generation real estate empire philanthropy boards, and the kind of social connections that open doors throughout the Americas. Her presence in first class is never questioned because her appearance and bearing match Reed's internal checklist of acceptable affluence. Behind her, Alejandro Vega embodies new Hispanic wealth investment banking success earned through MIT education and Wall Street networking. His tailored suit and Hermes briefcase signal prosperity in the language Reed speaks fluently. Alejandro's right to premium travel is assumed rather than questioned. Marcus Thompson occupies seat 4B with the comfortable authority of established media presence. As a tech journalist for major publications, his professional credentials provide immediate credibility. His questions carry weight because they come with the implicit threat of publication. In the middle section, David Kumar waits nervously in seat 5. Aware that his upgrade to this flight came through personal friendship rather than payment. The Hispanic real estate developer owes Reed money from a failed investment, and free flights represent partial debt forgiveness. Kumar understands the ethical problems with this arrangement but has rationalized them as harmless perks. The remaining passengers, a pharmaceutical executive, a legal consultant, and an art dealer, watch the confrontation with the uncomfortable awareness of privileged observers. They're close enough to wealth and power to understand the dynamics at play, but distant enough from direct involvement to maintain plausible neutrality. At the center of this rarefied world sits Zara Mitchell, her presence somehow both invisible and commanding. Her hoodie and jeans mark her as an outsider in Reed's visual taxonomy, but her calm demeanor suggests depths he can't fathom. She represents the intersection of authentic power and deliberate anonymity, a combination that challenges every assumption about who belongs where. Dr. Zara Mitchell closes her eyes for just a moment, centering herself in the familiar weight of deliberate invisibility. For 14 months, she has owned skybound aviation, acquired for $3.2 billion in a leveraged buyout that shocked the private aviation industry. But ownership and operational control are different things, and the anonymous complaints flooding her office prove that money alone can't change entrenched culture. The complaints arrive through encrypted channels. My husband and I were told our suite was needed for operational reasons, then watched a white couple get upgraded to it. The captain asked me 3 times if I was sure I had the right aircraft. They searched my luggage twice while white passengers with identical tickets passed through without inspection. Each complaint follows the same pattern: discrimination wrapped in operational language bias, disguised as security protocol. The legal department counseled settlements and silence, but Zara chose a different path: thorough documentation through direct experience. She created the identity carefully. Z. Mitchell, close enough to her real name to avoid deception charges, distant enough to maintain anonymity. The booking went through a third-party luxury travel broker paid with a corporate credit card registered to a shell consulting firm. Even her own staff believes she's in meetings at the New York office while she sits in seat 1A gathering evidence. The hidden recording device in her leather backpack captures everything. Legally, federal aviation regulations permit passenger recording in private aircraft cabins with proper notification, and her initial boarding announcement included standard consent language buried in routine safety information. Reed's discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's legally actionable. But beyond legalities lies personal mission. Zara has spent her adult life building wealth not for luxury's sake, but for power's purpose. Every algorithm she designed, every company she founded, every fortune she accumulated serves a single goal: ensuring that no young black girl ever experiences what she endured in that economy seat 17 years ago, crying silently while white passengers stared. The acquisition of Skybound wasn't business strategy, it was personal justice. And now, sitting in the seat Reed wants to deny her, Zara feels the satisfaction of a trap perfectly set. Every word from his mouth, every assumption from his prejudice builds the legal case that will transform not just his career but the entire industry's approach to discrimination. She opens her eyes and reaches for her phone, typing a single message to her assistant David Park. Phase 1 initiated. Evidence collection proceeding as planned. The response arrives instantly. Legal team standing by. PR crisis management activated. Board members monitoring situation remotely. Zara deletes the message and slides her phone back into her pocket. Reed continues his threats, unaware that every word is being documented by multiple sources for multiple purposes. The live streams and recordings will provide public accountability, but her official evidence gathering serves a larger goal: institutional change through legal consequence. Captain Marcus Reed surveys his domain with the satisfaction of a man who has never questioned his right to command. At 48, he embodies the classic image of American aviation authority: silver-haired, square-jawed, radiating the kind of confidence that emerges from decades of being obeyed without question. His military background shapes everything about his worldview. 22 years in the Air Force taught him that hierarchy exists for good reasons, that order depends on clear distinctions between those who command and those who comply. The transition to civilian aviation preserved those dynamics while adding financial incentives that military service never provided. But Reed's definition of clean record omits several inconvenient truths. His military service ended with counseled early retirement after multiple complaints about his treatment of female and minority subordinates. The complaints never rose to formal disciplinary action, but they created a pattern that made promotion impossible and lateral transfer inevitable. Civilian aviation provided a fresh start, but it also brought new pressures. The divorce settlement with his ex-wife Rebecca consumed 60% of his monthly income. The mortgage on his Westchester County house stretches his remaining budget to breaking point. His teenage daughter's private school tuition represents another monthly hemorrhage of money he can't quite afford. These financial pressures create psychological vulnerabilities that Reed himself doesn't recognize. When he sees a young black woman in an expensive seat, his subconscious performs rapid calculations. She represents money. He doesn't have status. He's losing power. He fears surrendering. The discrimination isn't conscious prejudice. It's economic anxiety expressed through racial bias. The confrontation unfolds with the predictable rhythm of institutional discrimination. Reed has performed variations of this script dozens of times, always with the same successful outcome. Problematic passengers comply with his authority and accept downgrades without formal complaint. Phase 1 begins with polite dismissal, disguised as helpful correction. There seems to be a computer glitch with your reservation, suggests that the passenger has done nothing wrong while creating doubt about their legitimacy. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in coach seating frames discrimination as customer service, implying that Reed is acting in Zara's best interest. When Zara provides calm, factual responses rather than defensive justification, Reed escalates to Phase 2, authority assertion. I am the pilot in command, establishes hierarchy, while my word is law on this aircraft, claims unlimited power. Demanding identification and credit card information creates the appearance of legitimate verification, while actually seeking evidence to justify predetermined conclusions. Her continued composure forces him into Phase 3 personal attack. This isn't a bus implies that she belongs in public transportation rather than private aviation. We have standards here suggests that her presence violates those standards. Some people just don't understand luxury travel positions here as inherently unsuited for elite environments. When these attacks fail to provoke the emotional responses he expects, Reed escalates to Phase 4, threat escalation. Calling airport security transforms the situation from customer service dispute to potential federal incident. Accusations of fraud invoke federal crimes carrying serious penalties. Threats of arrest raise the stakes to career-destroying levels. Marcus Thompson's Instagram livestream transforms from casual travel documentation into real-time civil rights broadcast. The viewer count climbs steadily, 347,612,891, as word spreads through social networks that something unprecedented is happening aboard a private jet at Teterboro Airport. The comments section explodes with reactions ranging from outrage to disbelief. "This is 2024, not 1954, appears repeatedly. Someone needs to identify this pilot and airline. This is why we need better discrimination laws." The hashtag private jet discrimination begins trending organically without coordination or promotion. Marcus narrates quietly but clearly, his journalism training helping him capture key details. For those just joining, we're witnessing what appears to be clear discrimination against a black passenger by the aircraft captain. She has a valid first-class ticket but is being forced to move based solely on her appearance. Isabella Rodriguez uses Snapchat to document the confrontation for her 23,000 followers, many of whom represent Latino luxury travel networks. Her story reaches audiences that traditional media rarely penetrates: wealthy Hispanic families who understand discrimination within elite spaces because they've experienced it firsthand. "This is exactly what happens to us," Isabella types over video of Reed's threats. "They think money makes it impossible, but prejudice finds a way." Her followers begin resharing immediately, expanding the audience beyond Marcus's tech industry followers to encompass luxury travel communities across the Americas. The digital explosion happens faster than anyone anticipated. Marcus Thompson's Instagram live viewer count hits 8,400 concurrent watchers as his followers share the stream across their own networks. Comments flood in so rapidly that they blur into an unreadable cascade of outrage and support. "This is unbelievable in 2024" appears dozens of times. "Someone identify this airline" emerges as a rallying cry. She needs a lawyer gets repeated by viewers with legal backgrounds. The organic anger spreads through social networks like digital wildfire, consuming everything in its path. TikTok amplifies the story differently. Short clips of Reed's most discriminatory statements rack up views in the tens of thousands within minutes. Users with massive followings at Luxury Travel Tea with 3 million followers at AvGeek Alert, with 890,000 at Corporate Chaos, with 1.7 million discover the content and reshare it to their audiences. The algorithm picks up on engagement velocity and pushes the videos to trending pages. Hashtag private jet racism climbs toward the top of trending hashtags. Hashtag skybound discrimination gains traction as users identify the airline. Hashtag Captain Karen emerges organically as Reed's behavior fits established patterns of entitled authority abuse. Sarah Kim grips her tablet with white knuckles, watching the passenger cabin tension escalate beyond anything in her 3 years of flight attendant training. The Skybound Aviation Employee Handbook covers difficult passengers, medical emergencies, and security threats, but nothing prepared her for watching her captain deliberately discriminate against a paying customer while passengers live-stream the entire confrontation. Her position creates impossible conflicts of loyalty. Military-style aviation culture demands absolute deference to captain authority. Flight attendants who question pilot decisions face immediate termination and industry blacklisting. But federal law requires crew members to report discrimination, and her personal ethics scream against participating in obvious prejudice. The tablet in her hands displays the passenger manifest, confirming what she told Reed Z. Mitchell booked seat 1. A legitimately paid full fare, cleared all security protocols. Her ticket status shows VIP designation, typically reserved for major clients. Everything about her booking appears normal except Reed's reaction to her appearance. Sarah's earpiece crackles with communication from First Officer James Rivera in the cockpit. Sarah, what's the delay about tower, is asking for departure timeline. She hesitates before responding. Admitting that Reed is discriminating against a passenger would force Rivera into his own impossible position: support his captain or report a federal civil rights violation. Flight crews depend on mutual support and absolute trust relationships that career-ending accusations can destroy instantly. Passenger seating issue, she responds carefully. Captain is handling it. But through the cockpit door, Rivera can hear raised voices and agitated conversation. His 15 years of aviation experience tell him this isn't routine passenger management. The tone, duration, and intensity suggest something beyond normal crew authority. Rivera faces his own ethical calculations. As first officer, he bears legal responsibility for flight operations and passenger safety. If Reed's behavior creates safety hazards or legal liability, Rivera's license could be affected regardless of his direct involvement. His wife and 2 children depend on his aviation career. Challenging Reed could destroy their financial security. Reed recognizes that the situation has spiraled beyond his control, but his military training instilled a fundamental principle: never retreat under fire. Each challenge to his authority demands stronger response. Each question about his judgment requires more forceful assertion of command. The logic that served him well in combat becomes catastrophic in civilian discrimination incident. I am the pilot in command of this aircraft, Reed announces to the entire cabin, his voice rising to lecture volume. Under federal aviation regulations, my authority supersedes passenger preferences, crew objections, and social media opinions. This aircraft operates under my judgment period. The Declaration of Absolute Authority attempts to establish legal cover for discriminatory decisions, but it actually increases his liability. Federal regulations grant pilots broad authority over safety and operations, but they explicitly prohibit discrimination based on race, gender, or ethnicity. Reed has just claimed legal protection for illegally prejudiced actions. Marcus Thompson immediately recognizes the legal significance. Captain, Are you saying federal regulations give you the right to discriminate against black passengers? Reed realizes he's walked into another trap, but retreating would acknowledge error and undermine the authority he's trying to protect. I'm saying federal regulations give me the right to ensure appropriate passenger placement based on operational requirements. What operational requirements specifically Isabella Rodriguez presses? Reed pauses, searching for operational justification for decisions based purely on racial bias. Weight and balance calculations don't support moving one passenger from front to back. Security protocols don't identify clothing or appearance as threat indicators. Safety regulations don't require passenger segregation by race or perceived economic status. Passenger compatibility and aircraft configuration requirements, Reed says, finally using technical language to disguise discriminatory intent. Compatibility with what Alejandro Vega asks. Reed's answer reveals the depth of his prejudice. Compatibility with the premium service environment and established clientele expectations. The statement acknowledges that Reed's decisions serve existing passenger preferences rather than operational requirements. He's admitting that he discriminates to maintain the comfort level of white passengers who expect racial exclusion in elite spaces. Look, certain types of passengers cause problems, Reed declares, gesturing vaguely toward Zara. The phrase certain types carries obvious racial coding that every witness understands. Marcus Thompson immediately highlights it in his livestream commentary. Note the language certain types of passengers. We all know what that means. When Isabella Rodriguez demands clarification, Reed compounds his error. I know troublemakers when I see them. 22 years of aviation experience teaches you pattern recognition. The claim of pattern recognition based on appearance acknowledges that his judgments rely on racial profiling rather than actual behavior or evidence. Sarah Kim recognizes the admission's legal significance. Captain, are you stating that passenger race affects service delivery or clientele compatibility? Reed realizes he's being trapped by his own crew member, recorded by multiple devices, but he can't retreat without destroying his command authority. His desperation drives him toward increasingly extreme positions. I'm stating that this aircraft provides premium service to premium passengers, and premium passengers have certain expectations about their travel environment. Isabella Rodriguez stands up again, her voice carrying the authority of old money and legal sophistication. Captain, you just described racial segregation as customer service. The phrase racial segregation hits Reed like a physical blow. It transforms his passenger management into explicit civil rights violation carrying federal criminal penalties and lifelong career destruction. But admitting error now would validate every challenge to his authority. I described appropriate passenger placement based on legitimate operational and service criteria. Reed responds, but his voice lacks conviction. While Reed destroys his career with every statement, Zara Mitchell conducts careful psychological analysis of the unfolding situation. Her tablet displays real-time social media monitoring showing hashtag trends, engagement metrics, and audience demographics. The viral spread exceeds her most optimistic projections for institutional change leverage. But social media exposure represents only one element of her comprehensive strategy. The hidden recording device in her backpack captures Reed's statements with legal-grade audio quality that will satisfy federal court evidence requirements. Multiple witness recordings provide corroborating evidence from different perspectives and platforms. More importantly, Reed's escalating statements reveal the psychological patterns underlying institutional discrimination. His progression from polite suggestion to explicit racial segregation demonstrates how individual prejudice reinforces organizational bias through authority structures. Her phone buzzes with encrypted messages from David Park legal team confirms federal violations. Multiple agencies requesting briefings. Stock price down 8% in after-hours trading. The immediate market response validates her strategy. Corporate discrimination creates financial consequences that motivate institutional change. Sarah Kim's courage in contradicting Reed unlocks a floodgate of suppressed institutional knowledge. As the confrontation intensifies, she begins sharing details that have haunted her professional conscience for months, details that Reed's current behavior makes impossible to ignore any longer. This isn't the first time Sarah whispers urgently to Isabella Rodriguez, who has positioned herself near the galley to offer support. 6 months ago, we had a black family booked in the forward cabin. Father was a federal judge, mother was a surgeon, 2 teenage kids heading to college interviews. Reed moved them to the back row, claimed weight distribution requirements. Isabella's eyes widen. Weight distribution. On a private jet. Complete fabrication. The aircraft was half empty, but the family was too polite to make a scene, and Reed's explanation sounded technical enough that they didn't challenge it. Sarah's voice cracks with guilt. I should have said something then. The pattern extends beyond isolated incidents, Sarah reveals. Reed has developed sophisticated techniques for discriminating while maintaining plausible operational cover. He calls it passenger optimization, she explains. Moving people around based on service efficiency or cabin balance or operational requirements. From his position in the cockpit doorway, First Officer James Rivera adds reluctant confirmation. The weight and balance reports never support his passenger moves, Rivera admits quietly. I've questioned the calculations multiple times, but he always has explanations about dynamic factors or performance margins. While Reed escalates his discrimination publicly, Zara conducts real-time investigation of his employment history through secure access to Skybound Aviation's personnel databases. Her tablet displays Reed's complete file, revealing disturbing patterns that explain his confidence in discriminatory behavior. Reed's hiring occurred during the 2021 pilot shortage when airlines competed aggressively for qualified captains. His military background and clean safety record made him an attractive candidate, but Skybound's screening process failed to identify the discrimination complaints that ended his Air Force career. The military records show a pattern of interpersonal conflicts with female and minority subordinates. Lieutenant Sarah Washington filed formal complaints about Reed's unprofessional comments regarding women's capabilities in combat situations. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez reported discriminatory treatment and hostile work environment created by Major Reed's attitudes toward Hispanic personnel. More troubling, Zara discovers that Reed's discrimination at Skybound has been documented but not addressed. Passenger complaint files show 12 formal complaints about Reed's behavior over 3 years, with an additional 47 informal complaints noted in customer service logs. The formal complaints reveal a consistent pattern. Captain Reed questioned my right to be in first class and made inappropriate comments about my appearance. Reed claimed operational requirements forced my family to move seats, but the explanation made no sense. I was treated with suspicion and hostility, while white passengers received respectful service. Each complaint was resolved through customer service protocols that offered flight credits and apology letters without addressing Reed's behavior. The complaint resolution notes consistently blamed misunderstandings and communication challenges while refusing to acknowledge discrimination. Reed recognizes that passenger support for Zara has shifted the power dynamic beyond his ability to control through traditional authority. Multiple passengers actively challenge his decisions. Crew members contradict his statements, and social media documentation ensures that his actions will face external scrutiny regardless of the immediate outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, Reed announces to the entire cabin, his voice carrying forced authority designed to reassert control. This aircraft will not depart until passenger seating arrangements comply with operational requirements and crew authority is respected. The statement transforms the situation from passenger discrimination into aircraft hostage scenario. Reed is threatening to ground the flight unless Zara accepts discriminatory treatment, forcing every passenger to choose between enabling racism and missing their travel plans. Isabella Rodriguez recognizes the legal implications immediately. "Captain, you're threatening to hold passengers hostage unless we participate in discrimination. That's federal crime under multiple statutes." At Skybound Aviation's Manhattan headquarters, the Emergency Crisis Management Protocol activates automatically as social media monitoring systems detect hashtags associated with the airline reaching viral threshold levels. Within 8 minutes of Marcus Thompson's livestream, beginning CEO Patricia Wells receives automated alerts that trigger immediate response procedures. The crisis management team assembles virtually within 15 minutes, connecting legal counsel, public relations executives, operational managers, and board members through secure video conference. Their screens display real-time social media analytics showing catastrophic reputational damage spreading across platforms faster than any previous corporate crisis in aviation history. Current exposure assessment, Patricia demands as the team finalizes connection protocols. Legal counsel Jessica Morrison provides immediate briefing. Multiple federal civil rights violations documented on livestream with 50,000-plus viewers. Captain Reed has made explicitly discriminatory statements that create unlimited liability exposure. Recommend immediate termination and cooperation with federal investigation. The memory hits Zara with unexpected intensity as she watches Reed's authority crumble around him. Suddenly, she's 16 again, standing in the first-class galley of Delta Flight 247 from Phoenix to Washington, D.C., tears streaming down her face, while white passengers stare with mixture of curiosity and satisfaction. She had won the National Science Foundation's Young Innovators Competition with an algorithm that optimized flight patterns for fuel efficiency. The prize included first-class travel to the awards ceremony, where she would meet senators, corporate executives, and fellow young scientists who would shape America's technological future. Dr. Sarah Patterson, the competition coordinator, had personally upgraded Zara's ticket as recognition of her exceptional achievement. "You've earned this," Dr. Patterson said, while handing over the boarding pass. "First class is exactly where young innovators belong." But walking onto Delta 247 in her best dress, a simple blue outfit her mother had saved for months to afford Zara, immediately sensed she didn't belong in the luxury cabin's world of leather seats and complimentary champagne. The flight attendant, a middle-aged white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, approached Zara's seat with suspicious smile. "Honey, I think there's been a mistake. The scholarship kids sit in coach." The words struck like physical blows. Scholarship kids. As if Zara's academic achievement diminished her worth rather than demonstrating her potential. As if intelligence itself became lesser when possessed by black teenagers. "This is my seat," Zara replied quietly, showing her boarding pass. 1A, Doctor. "Patterson upgraded me for winning the science competition." The flight attendant examined the pass with elaborate care, clearly hoping to find error that would justify her assumptions. When the pass proved legitimate, her demeanor shifted to barely concealed annoyance. "Well, regardless of how you got here, first class requires certain behavioral standards. No loud talking, no inappropriate music, no disrupting other passengers. Can you handle that?" The implication was clear. Black teenagers inherently create disruption that must be controlled through explicit warning. Zara's academic achievements meant nothing compared to racist assumptions about her behavior. But the humiliation escalated when other passengers began complaining. "Why is there a child in first class?" one businessman asked loudly. "This is supposed to be a professional environment." "Probably flying on taxpayer money," another passenger commented. "Diversity programs giving away seats that working people pay for." The flight attendant made no effort to correct these assumptions or defend Zara's legitimate presence. Instead, she approached with sympathetic expression designed to appear helpful while enforcing segregation. "Sweetie, I know this is exciting for you, but some passengers are uncomfortable with the situation. We have a lovely seat in coach where you'd be more comfortable with people your own age." The offer wasn't suggestion, it was command disguised as kindness. Refuse and face escalating hostility from passengers and crew, accept and validate every racist assumption about where black people belong. Zara looked around the cabin at faces filled with expectation that she would comply gracefully with her own humiliation. These were America's business leaders, political influencers, and cultural elites. This was the world she aspired to join through academic achievement and technological innovation. But that world rejected her presence even when she earned access through merit. Excellence meant nothing when filtered through prejudice. Achievement became worthless when constrained by assumptions about racial inferiority. "I'll move," Zara said quietly, gathering her small backpack with shaking hands. The walk to economy felt eternal. Every passenger watched her retreat, some with satisfaction, others with uncomfortable recognition of injustice they wouldn't challenge. The flight attendant escorted her personally, ensuring maximum visibility for the racial correction. Coach seat 34B was cramped and uncomfortable, but the physical discomfort paled beside emotional devastation. Zara spent the entire flight crying silently while other passengers slept or watched movies. The ceremony that should have celebrated her achievement felt meaningless after hours of demonstrated worthlessness. That night in her hotel room, Zara made a promise that would shape her entire future. One day, she would own the airline. She would own the aircraft, the seats, the crew members, and the authority to ensure that no black girl ever experienced airplane humiliation for the crime of academic excellence. Captain Marcus Reed's discriminatory worldview crystallized during his final year at the Air Force Academy when affirmative action policies brought increasing numbers of minority cadets into previously white-dominated military aviation programs. Reed watched black and Hispanic students receive flight training opportunities he believed should be reserved for candidates with his background and qualifications. The resentment deepened during pilot training when Lieutenant Sarah Washington outperformed Reed in advanced tactical scenarios. Her success challenged his fundamental assumption that military aviation excellence belonged naturally to white males. Rather than acknowledge her superior skills, Reed created alternative explanations for her achievement. "Diversity quotas," he told fellow trainees during off-duty conversations. "The Air Force needs minority success stories more than it needs qualified pilots." The rationalization protected Reed's ego while establishing psychological framework that would govern his approach to minority colleagues throughout his military career. Any black or Hispanic success became evidence of unfair preference rather than earned achievement. Isabella Rodriguez watches Reed's discrimination with the recognition that comes from personal experience with exclusion in elite spaces. Her family's real estate empire spans 3 generations, but wealth couldn't protect her from the subtle barriers that make luxury environments hostile to minority presence. Her own introduction to private aviation came through necessity rather than choice. Commercial flights to inspect family properties in Central America required multiple connections and lengthy delays that made business operations inefficient. Private charters provided schedule control and privacy that commercial aviation couldn't match, but her first luxury flight included its own education in prejudice. The flight attendant repeatedly questioned her right to board, demanding additional documentation that white passengers didn't provide. The pilot asked whether she was traveling on business or pleasure with undertones, suggesting that Hispanic women couldn't afford premium travel for legitimate business purposes. Isabella learned to navigate discrimination through careful presentation, designer clothing, expensive accessories, obvious wealth displays that made her presence less questionable. She developed strategies for avoiding confrontation while maintaining access to services her success had earned. Marcus Thompson's journalism background provides different perspective on the confrontation. He spent years documenting discrimination in corporate environments where bias operates through coded language and procedural manipulation. Reed's explicit statements represent unprecedented transparency about prejudices usually hidden behind professional rhetoric. Most discrimination happens in private conversations and internal decisions, Marcus explains to his livestream audience. What we're witnessing is real-time documentation of bias that's usually invisible to external observers. Sarah Kim experiences the confrontation through the complex psychology of institutional complicity. Her flight attendant training emphasized passenger service excellence, but it also taught her to defer to captain authority regardless of personal judgment about fairness or appropriateness. "I've been trained to support Reed's decisions, even when they feel wrong," Sarah admits to Isabella. "Flight safety depends on crew unity and passenger compliance with authority. But this isn't flight safety, it's just prejudice." Her decision to contradict Reed represents professional courage that few aviation employees demonstrate. Flight attendants who challenge captain authority face immediate termination and industry blacklisting. Sarah's family depends on her aviation income, but her conscience won't allow continued participation in discrimination. Zara Mitchell recognizes that Reed has reached the perfect moment of maximum exposure. His discrimination explicit, his authority crumbling, his legal liability complete. The viral audience peaks at 78,000 concurrent viewers across platforms, with hashtags trending nationally, and media outlets monitoring the live stream for breaking news coverage. She reaches for her phone with deliberate calm, her fingers moving across the screen with the precision of someone who has planned this moment down to the smallest detail. The number she dials connects directly to David Park, her executive assistant who has been monitoring the situation from Skybound's corporate headquarters. "David." "It's time," Zara says quietly, her voice carrying across the cabin's tense silence. Reed freezes mid-threat, his discriminatory monologue interrupted by the passenger he's been trying to humiliate. Something about her tone, calm, authoritative, utterly without fear, penetrates his anger-clouded judgment. Time for what Reed demands, but uncertainty creeps into his voice for the first time. Phase 2. Zara replies not to Reed, but to the phone. "Patch me through to the board meeting. Speakerphone, please." David Park's voice comes through clearly, standing by Ms. Mitchell. Board members are connected. "Shall I initiate the conference?" Reed stares at the phone, confusion replacing fury as his brain processes the impossible implications. Mrs. Mitchell doesn't match his assumptions about the young black woman he's been discriminating against. The formal address, corporate language, and immediate executive response suggest authority levels that don't align with his prejudiced expectations. Confirmed. Zara responds. Board conference active. The phone's speaker crackles to life, and suddenly the aircraft cabin fills with voices that carry the unmistakable authority of corporate leadership. "This is Patricia Wells, CEO of Skybound Aviation," the first voice announces. "Ms. Mitchell, we're monitoring the live stream. Are you safe?" Reed's face drains of color as the title registers. CEO of Skybound Aviation. But he's the captain, he's in command, he knows the corporate structure. There is no Ms. Mitchell in senior leadership. His mind rejects the evidence while his body recognizes the tone of unquestionable authority. "I'm fine," Patricia Zara replies with casual familiarity that suggests regular communication with the CEO. "But we have a significant problem with Captain Reed that requires immediate board action. We're prepared to authorize emergency personnel changes." Another voice responds. "Board member Thomas Richardson here. Captain Reed, you are hereby terminated from Skybound Aviation effective immediately." Reed's knees buckle slightly as the words penetrate his consciousness. Board member, immediate termination. These are corporate executives making personnel decisions about his career while he stands in his own aircraft. "That's impossible," Reed whispers, but his voice lacks conviction. The technological sophistication of the conference call the casual authority in the voices, and the immediate corporate response indicate institutional power he doesn't understand. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia Wells continues. "We're implementing Protocol 7 as discussed. All passengers will receive full refunds and compensation. Captain Reed's access credentials are being revoked now." Isabella Rodriguez leans forward, recognition dawning on her face. Ms. Mitchell, you're the owner of Skybound Aviation. It's not a question. It's a statement of realization that explains everything about Zara's calm confidence, her precise aviation knowledge, and her complete lack of intimidation by Reed's threats. Dr. Zara Mitchell. She confirms standing for the first time since the confrontation began. Chairman and majority owner of Skybound Aviation. The revelation hits the cabin like an explosion. Marcus Thompson's livestream erupts with comments as 78,000 viewers process the impossible reversal. The discriminated passenger is the airline owner. The woman Reed tried to humiliate owns the aircraft, his job, and his career. That's impossible, Reed repeats, but desperation replaces certainty. You can't be. You're not. He can't finish the sentence because completing it requires acknowledging that his discrimination was based on racist assumptions about who could possess wealth and authority. Admitting Zara's identity means admitting his own prejudice. I'm not what Captain Reed Zara asks quietly, but her voice carries new weight now that her authority is explicit rather than hidden. Reed stares at her, seeing the same young black woman in casual clothing who triggered his discrimination. But now he must reconcile that appearance with ownership of a $3 billion aviation company. His psychology can't process the contradiction. You don't look like... Reed begins, then stops as he realizes he's about to articulate exactly the prejudices that destroyed his career. I don't look like what Zara presses. I don't look like someone who could own an airline. I don't look like someone who belongs in first class. I don't look like someone who deserves respect. Each question forces Reed to confront the racist assumptions underlying his behavior. His discrimination wasn't based on operational requirements or security concerns. It was based on his inability to imagine black women possessing the wealth and authority that Zara actually held. The revelation transforms the cabin atmosphere from tense confrontation to explosive celebration as passengers process the magnitude of justice delivered through Zara's strategic patience. Marcus Thompson's live stream audience erupts with comments flowing faster than human comprehension can follow. "Oh my God, she owns the airline" appears hundreds of times in rapid succession. Best plot twist ever dominates the comment feed. This is better than any movie echoes across platforms as viewers share the unprecedented reversal. Isabella Rodriguez covers her face with her hands, laughing and crying simultaneously. Zara, you are absolutely brilliant. You let him hang himself completely with his own prejudice. The viewer count on Marcus Thompson's live stream explodes past 156,000 as social media algorithms detect unprecedented engagement velocity. TikTok videos featuring highlights from the confrontation begin accumulating millions of views within minutes. This is the most incredible corporate justice story in history. Marcus tells his audience, his journalism training barely containing his emotional response. She documented every discriminatory statement, every abuse of authority, every violation of civil rights, and she did it as the actual owner of the company. Sarah Kim approaches Zara with tears streaming down her face. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him immediately, but I was afraid of losing my job." Zara's response demonstrates the leadership philosophy that will reshape Skybound's culture. "Sarah, you found your courage when it mattered. You contradicted a superior officer to support civil rights. That's exactly the kind of crew member who belongs in leadership positions." Reed's psychological defenses collapse as the full magnitude of his situation penetrates his denial mechanisms. He's not just fired, he's been caught deliberately discriminating against the owner of his airline, while 200,000 people watched through livestream. Every prejudiced statement, every abuse of authority, every violation of civil rights has been recorded for permanent evidence. "This can't be real," Reed mutters, looking around the cabin desperately for someone who will validate his version of reality. She doesn't look like an airline owner. She's wearing a hoodie. This has to be some kind of mistake. His continued focus on Zara's appearance, even after learning her identity, reveals the depth of his racist conditioning. He literally cannot process the evidence that black women can own billion-dollar companies, so he searches for alternative explanations that preserve his prejudiced worldview. Captain Reed Isabella Rodriguez says with cold authority, "You've just proven that your discrimination had nothing to do with operational requirements. You're still questioning Dr. Mitchell's authority based on her clothing and appearance." "I was protecting the aircraft," Reed says weakly, his voice lacking any conviction. Alejandro Vega provides devastating response. "You were protecting the aircraft from its owner. You were maintaining security by discriminating against the person who signs your paychecks." Reed realizes that every justification he offered for his discrimination becomes absurd when applied to the airline owner. His security threats were actually corporate executives. His operational requirements were actually ownership prerogatives. His passenger management was actually customer service failure. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The lead agent announces displaying his badge. "Captain Reed, we need to speak with you about allegations of civil rights violations and conspiracy to commit aviation fraud." The phrase "conspiracy to commit aviation fraud" indicates that federal investigation extends beyond discrimination to encompass Reed's financial corruption. His kickback schemes, unauthorized passenger upgrades, and fuel fraud create additional criminal liability that could result in decades of federal prison time. Reed's face turns ashen as he realizes the comprehensive nature of his legal exposure. The discrimination he thought was private personnel decision has become federal civil rights case. The corruption he thought was harmless perks has become federal fraud investigation. "I want a lawyer," Reed whispers the first intelligent statement he's made all evening. "You'll have the opportunity to contact legal counsel from the federal detention facility," the FBI agent responds. "You're under arrest for violations of federal civil rights law and aviation regulations." The handcuffs click shut around Reed's wrists with metallic finality. The sound echoes through the cabin like punctuation mark at the end of his aviation career. 25 years of professional experience destroyed by 30 minutes of documented prejudice. Zara Mitchell stands at the front of the cabin, no longer concealing her authority behind casual clothing and quiet demeanor. The transformation is remarkable. The same person who endured 30 minutes of discrimination now commands the aircraft with natural leadership that makes Reed's insecure authority seem pathetic by comparison. First Officer Rivera Zara addresses the cockpit crew with calm professionalism. "You're now pilot in command of this aircraft. Do you feel comfortable completing this flight to London?" Rivera straightens with visible relief and pride. "Yes, ma'am. It would be an honor." The promotion from first officer to captain represents more than personnel adjustment. It demonstrates how leadership recognizes competence over seniority when character matters more than hierarchy. Sarah Kim Zara continues, "You showed remarkable courage in challenging discrimination despite personal risk. Effective immediately, you're promoted to senior flight attendant with responsibility for training our entire cabin crew in civil rights protocols." Sarah's tears of relief provide emotional punctuation to institutional change. Her decision to contradict Reed's authority receives recognition and advancement rather than punishment and retaliation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zara addresses the passengers. "I owe each of you an apology for the unprofessional behavior you witnessed tonight. This discrimination represents institutional failure that I take personal responsibility for correcting." The apology demonstrates leadership accountability that accepts responsibility for employee behavior rather than dismissing discrimination as isolated incident beyond corporate control. Patricia Wells speaks through the phone conference. "Dr. Mitchell, the board has approved comprehensive policy reforms effective immediately. All skybound personnel will complete mandatory civil rights training. We're establishing passenger advocacy positions in every regional office. Independent oversight committees will review discrimination complaints. As the Gulfstream G650 cruises smoothly at 45,000 feet over the Atlantic, Zara Mitchell finally allows herself to feel the emotional weight of what has just occurred. The 16-year-old girl who cried in economy seat 34B has been vindicated through the deliberate destruction of institutional discrimination that once humiliated her. But the satisfaction isn't revenge. It's restoration. Reed's career destruction serves justice, not because he suffered, but because his suffering prevents countless others from experiencing the humiliation he inflicted so casually. The live-streamed consequences create deterrent effect that will protect future passengers from similar discrimination. Isabella Rodriguez approaches Zara's seat with genuine curiosity about the strategic thinking behind the undercover investigation. "How long have you been planning this?" 14 months of active preparation, Zara replies, but honestly 28 years of psychological preparation. Every instance of discrimination I experienced growing up taught me something about how prejudice operates in elite institutions. The conversation reveals how personal experience with injustice can develop into strategic competence for social change. Zara's suffering wasn't meaningless. It was educational preparation for acquiring the power necessary to eliminate discrimination. The hardest part, Zara continues, was maintaining composure while he destroyed his own career. "I wanted to reveal my identity immediately and watch his face when he realized what he'd done. But letting him hang himself completely with his own prejudice created much stronger evidence for lasting change." Captain Rivera speaks over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Dr. Mitchell, on behalf of the crew, thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. The announcement provides closure to the flight while acknowledging that the real journey from discrimination to dignity will continue long after the aircraft lands." The live-streamed confrontation between Zara Mitchell and Captain Reed creates viral cultural moment that extends far beyond aviation industry into broader conversations about power, privilege, and accountability in American society. Within 48 hours, the hashtag #PrivateJetJustice accumulates over 50 million interactions across social media platforms. Major news outlets provide comprehensive coverage that transforms the incident from social media curiosity into serious discussion about discrimination in luxury industries. CNN interviews civil rights attorneys about the legal precedents established by Zara's strategic documentation. MSNBC examines how wealth concentration among minorities creates new opportunities for challenging institutional racism. The significance of Dr. Mitchell's approach explains Harvard Business School professor Dr. Amanda Torres during a televised panel discussion is that she used business ownership to create accountability mechanisms that traditional civil rights advocacy couldn't achieve. She didn't just protest discrimination, she eliminated its institutional protection. Corporate response throughout the transportation industry creates immediate policy changes as companies race to avoid similar discrimination scandals. Airlines, hotels, and luxury service providers implement mandatory bias training and passenger advocacy programs that preempt discrimination rather than responding to it after occurrence. The Mitchell Protocol is becoming industry standard, reports Aviation Week editor John Martinez. Companies are recognizing that discrimination prevention costs far less than discrimination litigation. Federal agencies begin comprehensive reviews of discrimination complaint handling across transportation industries. The Department of Justice announces new civil rights enforcement priorities that focus on institutional patterns rather than individual incidents. Dr. Mitchell's documentation methodology provides a model for how discrimination victims can create evidence that supports successful federal prosecution, explains DOJ Civil Rights Division attorney Lisa Washington. Her strategic approach will be taught to civil rights investigators nationwide. 6 months to the day after Reed's arrest at Teterboro Airport, Zara Mitchell books the same flight route on the same aircraft with the same seat assignment. But this time she travels openly as Dr. Zara Mitchell, chairman of Skybound Aviation, wearing business attire that matches her corporate position rather than casual clothing that concealed her identity. The contrast couldn't be more striking. Captain Rivera greets her personally at the aircraft door with professional respect that acknowledges her authority while maintaining appropriate crew-passenger boundaries. Sarah Kim, now senior flight attendant, provides service that combines efficiency with genuine warmth. "Dr. Mitchell, it's wonderful to have you aboard," Sarah says while helping her settle into Seat 1A. "This flight will always be special to our crew because of what happened here." Zara looks around the cabin, remembering the tension and conflict that filled this space 6 months ago. Now the atmosphere radiates professionalism, dignity, and mutual respect among crew and passengers of diverse backgrounds. A young black girl, perhaps 14 years old, boards with her family and receives the same warm greeting that every passenger enjoys. She settles into Seat 2B with her laptop and science fair project materials, clearly heading to some academic competition or educational opportunity. Zara recognizes herself in the girl's quiet confidence and obvious intelligence. But unlike Zara's experience at 16, this young woman will never face discrimination for her achievement or humiliation for her presence in elite spaces. "Excuse me," Zara says to the girl during flight service. "I couldn't help noticing your science project." "What are you working on?" "Orbital mechanics optimization for deep space missions." The girl replies with enthusiasm that reminds Zara of her own teenage passion for aerospace engineering. "I'm presenting at the National Space Foundation Youth Conference in London." "That's incredible work," Zara responds genuinely. "Are you planning to study aerospace engineering?" "Yes, ma'am. I want to design spacecraft that can reach other star systems. My goal is to solve the propulsion challenges that limit interstellar exploration." Zara smiles, recognizing the ambitious dreams that drive exceptional young minds toward seemingly impossible goals. That's exactly the kind of thinking that changes the world. What university programs are you considering? As the aircraft touches down at Heathrow, Zara feels the emotional closure that comes from promises kept and justice delivered. The 16-year-old girl who cried in economy seat 34B would be proud of the woman who transformed personal humiliation into institutional protection for countless others. But, more importantly, the 14-year-old girl in seat 2B will never experience airline discrimination because Zara's patient strategic implementation has eliminated the conditions that once made prejudice inevitable. The young scientist gathers her materials and prepares to present research that could revolutionize space exploration. She does so with confidence that her achievement will be celebrated rather than questioned, her presence welcomed rather than challenged, her dignity protected rather than violated. Zara watches the girl walk off the aircraft toward her academic conference, knowing that one promise kept has created conditions for countless new promises to flourish. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation that makes discrimination impossible rather than just illegal. As passengers deplane into the London terminal, they carry with them the understanding that individual courage, strategic patience, and institutional accountability can eliminate discrimination through deliberate change rather than symbolic gesture. The story that began with humiliation ends with hope, proving that power combined with purpose can transform entire industries through careful application of moral principles to business practices. Reed's discrimination taught Zara about the nature of prejudice, but Zara's response taught the world about the power of strategic justice to create lasting change that protects dignity for everyone. The aircraft that once served as stage for discrimination now serves as symbol of transformation, carrying passengers forward into futures where civil rights are protected through institutional design rather than individual courage alone. Justice achieved. Promise kept. Future secured. If you've ever faced discrimination for being who you are, your story matters. Share it in the comments below. Your experience could inspire someone else to find their courage or help create the changes we need to see in the world. And if this story of quiet dignity overcoming prejudice moved you, please hit that like button. Your support helps us share more stories that matter and reaches people who need to hear them. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest videos about justice, courage, and the power of standing up for what's right. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that change is possible when we refuse to accept discrimination. Together we can create a world where everyone travels with dignity. Because when we stand up for justice, we don't just change individual lives, we transform entire systems. And that's how real progress happens, one story at a time.